The bones of 1,000 species decorated the walls of the ship, called the Silent End. Skulls from creatures that once ruled entire planets now served as trophies. Teeth from predators that had terrorized star systems hung from chains. And in the center of this collection sat Shrike, cleaning blood from his claws. Shrike was a Vraxian, 8 feet tall, scales black as the space between stars. His jaw held thermal pits that could sense the heat of a beating heart from 300 meters away. His claws could tear through ship hulls. His eyes saw in spectrums that most species could not even name. For 200 years, Shrike had been the most feared hunter in 3 galactic sectors. He had killed warlords in their fortresses. He had assassinated admirals on their own bridges. He had hunted creatures that entire armies could not defeat. Never once had he failed a contract. The communication screen flickered to life. A Methusian face appeared. Blue skin. 3 sets of eyes. Nervous hands clasping together. "Hunter Shrike," the Methusian said. "I am Counselor Dravan. I have a contract for you." Shrike did not respond. He simply waited. Dravan continued. "There is a planet on the frontier. Harvest 7. My mining consortium holds rights to the mineral deposits there. But a group of settlers has established an unauthorized colony. They are interfering with our excavation operations." "You want them removed?" Shrike said. His voice was like stones grinding together. "I want them gone. Permanently. For 100 colonists. The payment is substantial." Shrike finally looked at the screen. "What species?" Dravan's 3 sets of eyes blinked in sequence. "Humans." The word meant nothing special to Shrike. He had heard of humans, a young species from a small planet somewhere in the outer arm of the galaxy. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last few centuries. Soft creatures. No natural weapons. No armor plating. No venom glands. They were barely worth hunting. "I accept," Shrike said. Dravan's relief was visible. "Excellent. I am transmitting the coordinates now. The payment will be deposited upon confirmation of the colony's elimination." The screen went dark. Shrike rose from his throne of bones and moved to the navigation console. His clawed fingers entered the coordinates for Harvest 7. The ship's engines hummed to life, and the Silent End slipped into hyperspace. During the journey, Shrike did what he always did before a hunt. He studied his prey. The ship's database contained information on thousands of species, and he accessed the files on humans. The data was unremarkable. Bipedal locomotion. Average height between 5 and 6 feet. Moderate physical strength compared to galactic standards. No natural weapons beyond small, flat teeth and weak nails. They could not see in infrared. They could not hear ultrasonic frequencies. They had no scales, no shells, no protective membranes. Shrike almost felt disappointed. This would not be a hunt. It would be a harvest. He read further. Humans came from a planet called Earth. The galactic database classified it as a Category 7 Deathworld, which was mildly interesting. Most spacefaring species came from stable, temperate worlds. But Shrike had hunted Deathworld species before. They were often tougher than their soft-world counterparts, but they all died the same way. The Silent End dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Harvest 7 system. Shrike activated his cloaking field and began his approach to the planet. Through his viewing screen, he could see the world below. Blue oceans, green landmasses, white clouds drifting across the atmosphere. It looked peaceful, unremarkable. His scanners located the human settlement on the northern continent. Simple structures made of local materials. Agricultural fields spreading out from a central cluster of buildings. Heat signatures indicated approximately 400 living beings. Shrike selected his landing zone. A forest at the edge of the settlement, near their water supply. He would observe first, as he always did, learn the patterns of his prey, find the weaknesses, then he would strike. The ship descended through the atmosphere, silent and invisible. It landed without a sound in the dense forest. Shrike checked his equipment. Claws sharpened, scales polished to reduce light reflection. Thermal dampeners activated to hide his own heat signature. He stepped out of his ship and into the alien forest. The air smelled strange. Organic compounds he did not recognize. pollen from plants that had never been cataloged. And underneath it all, something else. Something his instincts could not quite identify. Shrike moved through the trees toward the settlement. His thermal pits detected small creatures fleeing from his approach. Good. The local wildlife recognized a predator when they sensed one. He reached the forest edge as darkness fell over the land. Through the trees, he could see the human settlement. Lights glowing in windows. Figures moving between buildings. The sound of voices carried on the wind. Shrike settled into a hunting position and activated his bioscanners. Data began streaming into his neural implant. Heart rates, respiratory patterns, chemical signatures, and then his implant registered something that made him pause. The biochemical readings from the humans were unlike anything in his database of 3,000 catalog species. Hormones and compounds and combinations that should not exist in living creatures. Stress markers at levels that would kill most galactic life forms. And yet the humans moved normally, talked normally, laughed. For the first time in 200 years, Shrike felt something stir in his chest. Not fear, not yet, but something close to it. Uncertainty. He pushed the feeling aside. They were just humans. Suf, biak, primitiva humans. This would be easy. Shrike watched the settlement for 3 hours before he chose his first target. An older male human worked alone in the fields at the edge of the colony. Gray hair, weathered skin, hands that showed decades of labor. The human moved slowly, checking irrigation systems and examining crops even as darkness settled over the land. Perfect, isolated, unprotected, an easy kill to begin harvest. Shrike moved through the forest with the silence of a shadow. His cloaking field bent light around his body, making him invisible to normal eyes. His thermal dampeners hid his heat signature. No creature in the galaxy could detect him when he did not wish to be detected. He positioned himself 20 meters from a human, close enough for a killing strike. The thermal pits along his jaw tracked the human's heartbeat. Steady, calm. The beat of a creature that did not know death was watching. Shrike prepared to move. His muscles coiled, his claws extended, and then the wind shifted. The human scent reached Shrike's olfactory sensors, and his body froze mid-strike. Not by choice, by instinct. Something deep in his genetic code, older than thought, older than reason, screamed at him to stop. The scent was wrong. Shrike had hunted thousands of species. He knew the smell of prey, the chemical signature of fear, the hormones that meant submission. Every creature in the galaxy produced them. It was the universal language of predator and prey, written in biology itself. The human produced none of these. Instead, Shrike detected compounds his database could not identify. Stress hormones in concentrations that should cause cardiac failure. Adrenaline levels that should trigger uncontrollable panic. And yet the human's heartbeat remained steady. His movements remained calm. This was not the scent of prey. This was the scent of something else. Something Shrike had no category for. The human suddenly stopped working. He straightened his back and turned his head toward the forest. Toward Shrike. Impossible. The cloaking field was perfect. No visual spectrum could penetrate it. No sensor technology could detect it. The human could not possibly know Shrike was there. But the human was looking directly at him. I know something's out there, the human said. His voice was calm, almost casual. Been feeling watched all evening. Hair on the back of my neck, standing up. Never wrong about these things. Shrike remained frozen. He was invisible. The human was bluffing. He had to be bluffing. The human reached down and picked up a farming tool. Not a weapon, just a metal implement for working the soil. He held it loosely at his side. If you're hungry, the human continued, I've got stew on the fire. Good stuff. My wife's recipe. If you mean harm, well... The human smiled. It was not a nervous smile, not a fearful smile. It was the smile of a creature that had faced danger before and was not impressed. You'll find we don't go easy. Shrike's thermal pits detected the change in the human's biochemistry. The stress hormones increased. The adrenaline spiked. But the heartbeat did not race. It slowed, became more powerful, more controlled. The human's body was preparing for combat, not flight. Kumba. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Prey did not prepare to fight an unseen predator. Prey ran. Prey hid. Prey submitted. The human did none of these things. The human waited, patient and ready, for whatever might come out of the darkness. Shrike found himself taking a step backward, then another, his body moving without his conscious command. The human watched the forest for several more minutes. Then he shrugged. "Suit yourself," he said. "Offer stand if you change your mind." He turned his back on the forest, turned his back on Shrike, and walked slowly toward the settlement, whistling a simple tune. Shrike remained motionless until the human disappeared into one of the buildings. Then he retreated into the deeper forest, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. He had faced creatures that could kill with a thought. He had hunted predators that ate star ships. Never once had he felt the urge to retreat. But something about that human, that soft, weak, elderly human, had triggered every survival instinct Shrike possessed. Back aboard the Silent End, Shrike accessed his bioscanner's complete analysis of the human. The data filled his screen. Heart rate during the encounter, elevated but controlled. Blood pressure, optimal for physical exertion. Hormone profile, a cocktail of chemicals that should have caused panic, rage, and collapse, all present simultaneously, all perfectly balanced. And there was something else, a pheromone signature that Shrike's computer flagged as anomalous. The human had not just been ready to fight. The human had been excited by the possibility. Shrike stared at the data. The human had known something dangerous was watching him. And instead of fear, he had felt anticipation. What kind of species looked forward to confronting a predator? Shrike began accessing the Galactic Historical Database. He needed to know more about these humans. He needed to understand what he was dealing with. Because for the first time in 200 years, Shrike was not certain he was the apex predator on this planet. Shrike spent the night reading about humans. What he found made his scales grow cold. The Galactic Database contained scattered reports from species that had encountered humanity. Most were fragmentary. Many were classified. All were disturbing. He started with their homeworld, Earth, a planet that should not have produced intelligent life. The world had a molten core that generated magnetic storms. Its atmosphere contained oxygen at concentrations that made the air itself flammable. The planet experienced temperature swings of over 100 degrees between seasons. Its surface was covered with predators, parasites, and poisons in endless variety. Most galactic species came from stable worlds, planets where the temperature never changed, where food was abundant, where danger was rare. Evolution on such worlds produced intelligent beings who could focus on thought instead of survival. Earth was different. Earth was a war. Humans had evolved not despite their hostile world, but because of it. Every generation faced extinction. Every individual faced daily threats. The weak died. The strong survived. And over millions of years, humanity became something the galaxy had never seen before. A species built for endless endurance. Shrike read the biological analysis with growing horror. Human muscles contained slow-twitch fibers that could operate for days without rest. Their cardiovascular system could sustain activity that would kill any other known species within hours. They did not rely on explosive speed or overwhelming power. They simply did not stop. The galactic term for this was persistence predation. Humans had evolved to chase their prey across continents, following animals for days until those animals collapsed from exhaustion. While other species needed to win quickly or retreat, humans just kept coming. Forever. But that was not the worst part. Shrike found records from the Telvari incursion, a minor border conflict between humanity and a reptilian species called the Telvari. The Telvari had better weapons, better ships, superior numbers. The war lasted 3 weeks. One report described a battle where 3 human soldiers held a defensive position against 200 Telvari warriors. The humans ran out of ammunition on the first day. They ran out of food on the 3rd day. They ran out of water on the 5th day. They held the position for 19 days. When reinforcements arrived, the 3 humans were still alive. Barely. One had lost an arm. Another had been shot 7 times. The third had not slept in 11 days. The Telvari commander had surrendered, not because he was defeated, because his soldiers refused to attack anymore. They had become convinced the humans could not be killed. Shrike found another report. The siege of Brennan Station. A mining outpost had been attacked by pirates. During the assault, the station's medical officer had been cut off from the main group. She had been wounded badly. A piece of shrapnel in her abdomen. A broken leg. She crawled through 40 kilometers of toxic wasteland over the course of 2 days to reach the supply depot and bring back ammunition. 40 kilometers, with a broken leg, through air that burned her lungs with every breath. When asked later how she had done it, her response was recorded in the database. People were counting on me. What else was I going to do? Shrike stared at those words for a long time. He searched for more. He found records of humans surviving falls that should have shattered every bone. Records of humans continuing to fight after injuries that should have caused immediate unconsciousness. Records of humans adapting to environments that should have killed them within minutes. One report described a human who had been exposed to hard vacuum for over 90 seconds. The human had survived. Not comfortably, not without injury, but survived. The galactic average for vacuum survival was 30 seconds. Most species fell unconscious within 15. Shrike closed the database and sat in silence. He understood now what he was facing. Humans were not soft. They had simply evolved on a world so hostile that nothing in the galaxy registered as a serious threat to them. They did not panic because panic was useless on their world. Creatures that panicked died. Creatures that stayed calm and fought survived. They did not flee because fleeing was often more dangerous than fighting. On Earth, predators chased running prey. Standing your ground was often the safer option. They did not give up because giving up meant death. Every human alive was descended from countless generations of ancestors who had refused to quit, no matter the odds, no matter the pain. Shrike was a predator. He understood predators. But humans were not prey. They were something far more terrifying. They were predators who had been forced to evolve as prey. They had all the survival instincts of a hunted species combined with all the aggression of a hunting species. They were paranoid and patient, cautious and relentless, fearful and absolutely unwilling to submit. The old human in the field had since Shrike despite all his cloaking technology. Human instincts, honed by millions of years of being hunted by everything on their deadly world, had detected the presence of a predator through pure intuition. And instead of running, the human had prepared to fight. Shrike thought about his contract. 400 humans. He had hunted larger groups before, but he had never hunted a species that smiled at danger. He needed more information. He needed to observe these creatures further. He needed to understand exactly what he was dealing with before he made his next move. Because for the first time in his long career, Shrike was not sure he could win. When the sun rose over the settlement, Shrike returned to his observation post. He had decided that his research was incomplete. He had read about humans, but reading was not the same as seeing. He needed to watch them, study their behavior, find weaknesses that the historical records might have missed. He found a position in the forest where he could observe the central square of the settlement. His cloaking field made him invisible. His thermal dampeners hid his heat. He was a ghost among the trees. The humans began their day early. Adults emerged from buildings and moved toward their various tasks. Farmers walked to the fields. Mechanics headed to a workshop. Others gathered in what appeared to be a communal eating area. Shrike watched them with his bioscanners running. Heartbeats, hormone levels, stress markers. Everything appeared normal by human standards, which meant everything was deeply abnormal by galactic standards. Then the children appeared. A group of young humans, ages ranging from perhaps 5 to 12 in their years, gathered in the central square to play. They ran. They chased each other. They climbed on structures that were clearly not designed for climbing. Shrike observed their behavior with growing unease. One child, a female approximately 7 years old, attempted to leap from one raised platform to another. She misjudged the distance. She fell. The impact was significant. Shrike's scanners registered the force. The child struck the ground hard, scraping skin from her knee and palm. Red blood, iron-based, primitive but functional, began flowing from the wounds. The child cried. Tears rolled down her face. She clutched her injured knee and wailed. Shrike waited for the adult response. Surely the parents would rush to their injured offspring. Surely there would be panic, concern, perhaps medical intervention. The other children gathered around the injured girl. They looked at her wounds. They made sympathetic sounds. And then one of them laughed. "Nice fall," the laughing child said. "I did that same thing last week. Look, I still have the scab." The injured girl's crying began to slow. She wiped her face with dirty hands, smearing tears and dust across her cheeks. She looked at her wounds. Then she did something that made Shrike's scales crawl. She reached down, grabbed a handful of dirt and plant material, and packed it directly into her open wound. Shrike's medical knowledge screamed at the wrongness of this. Open wounds required sterile treatment. Introducing foreign biological material was an invitation for infection. This was madness. The girl stood up. She tested her leg. She winced once. Then she returned to playing, running, jumping, acting as if the injury had never happened. Shrike watched, frozen, as the child who had been bleeding and crying moments ago attempted the same jump again. This time she made it. She cheered. The human children were training. Training to ignore pain. Training to continue functioning despite injury. Training to treat wounds as minor inconveniences rather than serious events. And they were doing it so young. Shrike shifted his attention to the adults. Perhaps they would show more sensible behavior. He was wrong. Around midday, smoke began rising from one of the storage buildings. Within seconds, orange flames were visible through the windows. A fire had broken out. On any civilized world, this would trigger immediate evacuation. Emergency protocols. Perhaps military response. The humans did something different. They organized. Without apparent communication, without shouting or confusion, the humans nearest to the fire began forming a line. Containers appeared from buildings. A chain formed from the water supply to the burning structure. They were not running away from the fire. They were attacking it. Shrike watched with his bioscanners recording every detail. The humans' stress hormones spiked. Their heart rates increased. Adrenaline flooded their systems. And then something impossible happened. As the humans worked to fight the fire, as they passed containers of water hand to hand, as smoke billowed around them and flames roared nearby, their stress hormone levels began to drop. They were becoming calmer. The emergency was making them more relaxed, not less. Shrike ran the data again. There was no error. The humans were experiencing a biochemical response that defied all logic. Danger was improving their mental state. He searched his database for the human term and found it. Excitement. These creatures interpreted mortal danger as recreation. The fire was extinguished within 20 minutes. The damage was contained to a single building. No one was seriously hurt, though several humans had minor burns and smoke damage. And they were laughing. Standing in front of the scorched building, covered in soot and ash, the humans were laughing and joking with each other. One man showed off a burned patch on his arm like a trophy. A woman described her close call with a falling beam as if it were an adventure story. Shrike watched the old farmer from the night before move through the crowd. The man called Bernard, according to the name Shrike had heard others use. Bernard clapped people on the back. He smiled. He made a joke that caused the group to laugh louder. These creatures had nearly lost valuable resources. They had risked their lives, and they treated it as entertainment. Shrike thought about the galactic species he had hunted. Species that fled from danger. Species that froze in terror. Species that surrendered rather than face pain. Humans did none of these things. Humans ran toward fire. Humans laughed at destruction. Humans treated survival as a game. As darkness fell over the settlement, Shrike made a decision. He could not observe any longer. Either he completed his contract tonight, or he admitted something that no Vraxian hunter had ever admitted, that he was afraid of his prey. Shrike moved through the settlement like death itself. The night was deep and dark. Most of the humans had retreated to their dwellings. Only a few lights still glowed in windows. The colony was vulnerable. His target was the power generator, a simple structure at the edge of the settlement that provided energy to the entire colony. Destroy it. and the humans would be forced to evacuate. Without power, they could not survive the coming winter on this frontier world. It was elegant, clean, no direct killing required. The colony would simply cease to exist, and Counselor Dravan would have his planet. Shrike slipped between buildings, his cloaking field bending light around his massive form. His thermal dampeners kept him invisible to any detection equipment. He was a shadow with claws, a nightmare with purpose. The generator building was ahead, unguarded. These humans were either arrogant or stupid, perhaps both. He was halfway across an open yard when he heard the voice. Wow! Shrike froze. A human child stood less than 5 meters away. A male, approximately 10 years old, wearing sleep clothes, holding a small container of what appeared to be food. The child was looking directly at Shrike. "Are you an alien?" the child asked. Shrike's cloaking field was active. His thermal dampeners were functioning. Every piece of technology he possessed said that he should be completely invisible. But the child was staring straight at him. "You're really tall," the child continued. "And you got cool scales. My name's Paul. I was getting a snack because I couldn't sleep. What's your name?" Shrike did not move. He did not speak. He was an apex predator, 200 years of killing distilled into 8 feet of scale and claw, and he had been spotted by a child looking for a midnight snack. The child tilted his head. "Can you talk? Some aliens can't talk with their mouths. I read about that. There's a species that communicates through color changes. Is that what you do?" Shrike's mind raced. He could kill the child. One strike, silent and quick. No alarm would be raised. No witness would survive. But his claws would not move. The child took a step closer. Closer to the invisible predator. Closer to death. "You don't have to be scared," Paul said. "We're friendly here. My dad says we'll probably meet aliens eventually." "Are you friendly?" "Scared." The child had said scared. The child thought Shrike was afraid. And the worst part was that the child was right. Something about this small human, this tiny creature with no weapons and no armor and no chance of survival in a fight, terrified Shrike in a way that nothing had terrified him in 2 centuries. It was the complete absence of fear. The child had spotted an 8-foot predator in the darkness, and his response was curiosity. Not fear, not flight. Curiosity. What kind of species raised children who found monsters interesting? Paul turned toward one of the buildings. "Dad," he called out. His voice carried through the night air. "There's a really big alien in our yard." Lights began turning on. Shrike's hunting instincts finally overrode his paralysis. He ran, an apex predator fleeing from child. Behind him, he heard voices. Human voices. But not the voices of frightened prey. These were the voices of the curious, the interested, the welcoming. Did anyone get a picture? What did it look like? Maybe it's friendly. "Paul, did it seem friendly?" "It seemed shy, Mom. I think I scared it." Shrike reached his ship and slammed his claw against the airlock control. The door hissed open. He threw himself inside and sealed the entrance behind him. His scales were trembling. Vraxian scales did not tremble. Vraxians were the galaxy's ultimate predators. They did not feel fear. They did not know weakness. They did not run from children. But Shrike was trembling. He moved to his command chair and collapsed into it. His breathing was rapid. His hearts were pounding. His thermal pits were detecting his own elevated temperature. He was experiencing a physiological response he had not felt since infancy. A response he had thought his species had evolved beyond. Terror. Not terror of human weapons. Not terror of human technology. Terror of something far worse. Terror of a species with no self-preservation instinct. The child had approached a predator in the darkness. The child had tried to make conversation. The child had called out to bring more humans closer to the threat. And the humans had come. Not with weapons. Not with defensive formations. They had come with curiosity. They wanted to meet the monster. Shrike pulled up his bioscanner data from the encounter. The child's hormone levels had shown slight elevation. Mild excitement. The same biochemical signature the humans had displayed during the fire. The child had been thrilled to encounter an alien predator in the night. Shrike stared at the data for a long time. Then he began plotting a course away from Harvest 7. He was not going to complete this contract. He was not going to try again. He was going to leave this planet and these impossible humans, and never return. Because Shrike had finally understood the truth. He was not the hunter here. He was the prey, and the prey had found him interesting. Counselor Dravan's office was decorated with expensive art from a dozen worlds. Paintings that cost more than most beings earned in a lifetime. Sculptures carved from materials found only in the cores of dying stars. Everything designed to show power and wealth. Shrike stood in the center of this display and felt nothing but contempt. "You want to explain yourself?" Dravan demanded. 3 sets of eyes glared with barely controlled rage. "I paid for a colony elimination. I did not pay for you to come back with excuses." "I am returning your payment," Shrike said. His voice was flat, empty. "The contract is canceled." Dravan's blue skin darkened with anger. "Canceled? You are Shrike. You do not cancel contracts. You have never failed in 200 years. I'm not failing. I am refusing. They are just humans." Dravan slammed a hand against his desk. "Soft creatures from a primitive world. 400 of them against the deadliest hunter in the galaxy. How is this even a question?" Shrike reached into a compartment in his armor and withdrew a data chip. He placed it on Dravan's desk. "What is this?" Dravan asked. "Everything I learned about humans during my observation. I suggest you review it carefully before you hire another hunter." Dravan grabbed the chip and inserted it into his console. Data began scrolling across the screen. Biological analyses, historical records, behavioral observations. Dravan's 3 sets of eyes widened as he read. "This cannot be accurate," he said. "Stress hormone levels that would cause heart failure in any civilized species? Pain tolerance beyond all recorded parameters? They packed dirt into open wounds." "All accurate," Shrike confirmed. "And that is only the beginning." He told Dravan about the child, about the boy named Paul who had spotted an invisible predator in the darkness and responded with curiosity instead of fear, about the humans who had come running not to fight the monster, but to greet it. "They wanted to meet me," Shrike said. "They were disappointed when I left." Dravan stared at him. "You fled from a child. I fled for what the child represented. A species without self-preservation instinct. A species that treats predators as potential friends. A species that cannot be intimidated because they do not understand why they should be afraid." Shrike moved closer to Dravan's desk. His shadow fell across the Methusian politician. "You called them primitive," Shrike said. "You called them weak. But their world is classified as a category 7 Deathworld. They evolved surrounded by predators, poisons, and disasters. Everything that should have killed them only made them stronger. They're still just flesh and bone. They can be killed. Yes, individual humans can be killed. But humans are not individuals. They're a pack species. They form bonds with everything around them. They adopt predators as companions. They form emotional attachments to machines, to buildings, to ideas." Shrike leaned down until his face was level with Dravan's. "They will form emotional attachments to each other. Kill one human, and every human connected to that individual will hunt you. Not for resources, not for territory, for revenge. And they will not stop. They will not tire. They will not negotiate." Dravan's anger had faded. In its place was something else. Understanding. "Horror. What do I do?" he asked quietly. "The mining rights are valuable. I cannot simply abandon them." "Negotiate," Shrike said. "Offer partnership. Share the profits." Humans respond well to fairness. They have a strong sense of reciprocity. Treat them as equals, and they will be valuable allies. "And if I refuse? If I hire another hunter?" Shrike straightened to his full height. "Then I will upload my complete analysis to the Galactic Predators Guild database. Every hunter will know what humans truly are. No one will accept your contract." He turned toward the door. "Shrike." Dravan's voice stopped him. "In 200 years, you have hunted the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Is this truly the first species that has made you afraid?" Shrike considered the question. He thought about the old farmer who had sensed him through a cloaking field, the child who had tried to befriend a monster, the humans who had run toward fire instead of away from it. "Yes," he said, "because they're the first species I have encountered that does not know how to be afraid. And any creature without fear is more dangerous than any predator could ever be." He left without another word. 3 days later, Shrike uploaded his complete analysis to the Galactic Predators Guild database. The file was tagged with a single classification: do not engage. The file became required reading for every hunter in the guild. Many did not believe it at first. Some attempted to prove Shrike wrong by taking contracts against human targets. None of them succeeded. And on the planet Harvest 7, in the colony that had been scheduled for elimination, life continued as normal. Bernard, the old farmer, stood at the edge of his field as the sun rose. He looked up at the sky, at the stars fading in the morning light. "You know," he said to his wife, who had come to bring him breakfast, "I think we had a visitor a few nights ago. Something watching from the forest. Probably just an animal," his wife said. Bernard nodded slowly. "Maybe, but whatever it was, it left pretty quick." He smiled and took the food she offered. "Guess we weren't very interesting after all." He turned back to his crops, already planning the day's work. Above him, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the galaxy's deadliest hunter was telling others of his kind to stay away from the small creatures called humans. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were something far worse. They were impossible to frighten, and they really wanted to be friends.